This is an opportunity for Zack Polanski to talk to us about why socialists should join the Green Party. Most people here will know that he is going to stand as leader of the Green Party on a ticket that he calls eco-populism. And he's currently deputy leader of the party and a member of the London Assembly. I'm going to leave him to tell you anything else that he wants to tell us about himself, and people will be free to ask any questions, not too personal, but if you want to know more details about Zack's background, you'll be free to ask, but also think carefully about the political questions that you have. Zack's going to talk first for about 20 minutes, I think, and then we'll open it up for questions. We'll have lots and lots of time for questions. So please get your pen ready, jot down the question you want to ask as he's talking, and let's hear from Zack. It's great to see you here with us, Zack, and it's really lovely to have so many people turning up to listen to you on this Sunday evening. So over to you, Zack.
Thank you very much, Tony, and thanks to everyone for organising, and also everyone for being on the Zoom, because you could be doing anything on this sunny Sunday evening, and you have responded to a call of why socialists should join the Green Party. So if nothing else for what I'm about to talk about, thank you for turning up and being curious. It's genuinely really appreciated. I'm really aware that there's a spectrum of people on this call. Some of the names I already recognise, so I know that I've got friends on this call, other people I know who are curious about the Green Party, and other people I know who I imagine are a little bit cynical about the Green Party, and I understand that too. So what I'm going to try and do is start from the very beginning, and I suppose that comes with the caveat of, if I'm saying some things that are obvious to you, I'm not talking to this group like you're ignorant. I'm just presuming we're starting right from the beginning, and then I'll work through. Hopefully when I hear your questions and your comments, I'll realize even more where the conversation is being pitched and where we're at. I guess the first thing to say is share a common understanding of where this country is right now. Easy to despair. And I'm hoping on this call to offer lots of hope, and I'm hoping collectively, more than just me, but actually this group of people collectively, when we talk about what could happen next and what the possibilities are, that we can leave this call feeling a lot more hopeful and a lot more inspired about what the future is. But I think if we go there too quickly, and we don't, first of all, connect with the anger and the despair in the country right now, then we're not really talking about the material reality for millions of people in this country. So what is that reality? Well, we've had 14 years of conservative government that have absolutely broken the country from austerity and underinvestment. We have mass inequality in the country, where poor people have got poorer than they've ever before, and rich people, some of them, are richer than they've ever been before. And that's why a lot of what I and the Green Party talk about is ultimately about taxing wealth, and the fact that we should really be charging or taxing wealth a lot more than we're taxing income. Because right now we are taxing people who work with their hands or with their brains, sometimes a lot more than we are taxing multimillionaires and billionaires. And one really tangible example of this I had just a few weeks ago. I filmed a political broadcast with Channel 4, where in the morning I met a group of South American cleaners who were part of the union United Voices of the World. This is a migrant union who were working for people both for better pay and dignity and working conditions. And I spoke to them about the fact they weren't even being paid a living wage. And then in the afternoon, I spoke to a patriotic millionaire. I'm sure you've all come across this concept, but it's a group of millionaires who are essentially saying, please tax us more because we all benefit from a more equal society. And there's one line that the patriotic millionaire I met said that has stuck with me ever since. He said that if I owned a building that the cleaners you met this morning were cleaning, they could be paying more in tax than me as the owner of the building. And I just think that's a really tangible example of how broken our social contract is. Now, I know that wasn't just for Conservatives in the last 15 years. That was under Blair, it was under Thatcher, and it's more examples of neoliberalism and where capitalism leads you to if you just allow it to continue as we have. And I don't think Liz Truss was some kind of aberration. in the way that I don't think Trump or Farage is an aberration. They are the natural extension of what happens if you just allow the market to be free, if you just allow this experiment to happen where you create tax cuts for the very wealthy, you don't invest in your public services, and you move money from public money into private capital. I think that's where you end up. And so then lots of people voted for the Labour government because Keir Starmer ran on a ticket of change, and he came in as if he was riding on his white horse. And I know opinions might be divided on this call, although I imagine probably not as divided as I might imagine, that it's been an utter failure. And actually, not only has it been bad, it's made things worse, because this was meant to be a Labour government. And if they were meant to be the hope, and if they were meant to be the alternative, it's not a surprise that then people reject the establishment politics and the two-party system, which I'll come to in a moment, because I think that presents a huge opportunity. But I think what we're seeing right now is it offers a huge danger, a danger that we haven't seen in the country, I would say, in our lifetimes, or certainly my lifetime. And so I think that's the situation where we're in now, where these points are well rehearsed, but I think they're always worth saying no matter who is talking about them, where pensioners are being kept away from their winter fuel payments that were promised. The WASPy women have been screwed over. The two-child benefit cap has been continued. And of course, I imagine we'll get into this, but the genocide in Gaza, where we have a government that is not just complicit, but active participants in selling the parts and in sharing intelligence. And so we've reached a situation where I think people felt that even if they didn't like the government or they didn't like politicians, they could maybe fundamentally trust them, or they believed that they would act in good faith, or they would connect with them. And I think we're seeing an utter breakdown of that kind of international law, or the sense of any democratic decency. And this, we know, is giving a huge vacuum in our politics, that Nigel Farage is centre stage with Donald Trump, essentially singing a duet, for want of a better metaphor. And the reason why people are moving to Farage, I don't think should surprise us. And I want to be really clear about this in this call, that I absolutely condemn the Reform MPs. I condemn everything that they stand for. And I think it's always important, as I did a few days ago on Sky News. I was on with a Reform spokesperson, and I said, anytime you're hearing from Reform on TV, there should be a ticker at the bottom of the screen that says that 95% of their external donations come from oil and gas companies and climate denying companies. And so it shouldn't surprise us when they are looking to wreck both the planet, but also to make social inequality even worse through their plans. But what I think makes them more dangerous than the Tories, and I would argue this Labour government, is that they are kind of cosplaying as working class. They are a group of millionaires who are trying to speak for the working class while actually serving the billionaires. And we know from history, and there will be historians on this call, I'm sure, who can speak to this better than I am, but it's a very dangerous combination when you have a small group of elites who are looking to mobilize the working class in a way that demonizes the other. And I think we're seeing that constantly at the moment, whether that be the dehumanization, their behavior towards trans people. I think we're seeing it with lots of different other groups, or different groups where people are being othered and not being represented by the political system. So the very obvious question then is, if I'm saying that the Tories have utterly failed, as we knew they would, the Labour Party haven't offered an alternative, and Nigel Farage, I think, doesn't bear worth thinking about in terms of where we can go, I still think we need to speak about those people who are thinking about voting reform, because I think those are the exact sort of people that, if your politics is made up of compassion and care, we should be looking to reach out to. Because I think a small group of them, when I speak to them on the doorstep, are explicitly racist, and I'm never going to be able to appeal to them, or not anytime soon, I don't think, and nor should we try to. I think in that case, we just need to beat reform. But I think there's a much bigger group, and I would say a large majority of people who are not racist, but they look to immigrants, and they are feeling the effects of austerity, the lack of houses, the lack of a ability to get an NHS appointment, the fact that things feel congested and it all feels chaotic. And they are listening to mainstream media that is pointing the finger at migrants. We know that migrants are not the problem here, but actually we need migrants in our society. For anyone who uses the National Health Service, anyone who treats or cares for you is so much more likely to be a migrant than anyone in front of you in the queue. If you want to look at economic arguments, migrants are so much more likely to be putting money into our system through tax, because they're more likely to be of a younger working age than they are taking out of social security or welfare. But I don't even think the economic arguments are the arguments I would like to make. The arguments I would like to make is that no one should have to do a trick or juggle or do some music or contribute some food to be seen as human, for us to recognize their dignity. I think the clue is in the phrase there. They are human, and any human being that comes to this country, whether they're seeking oppression, whether they're fleeing for asylum, or whether they're an economic migrant, deserve nothing, not nothing, but our kindness and compassion, as well as an expectation that they will contribute to the society in some way. But I don't think that's about seeing their humanity coming over there. And I think the fact that this issue has become so culture warred gives us an example of how much that has been missing in the mainstream of politics, for people to stand forward and say, actually, migration is a really important thing. And I'm aware that I'm speaking to an audience that I imagine is almost all Jewish, if not Jewish curious. And we recognize this in our DNA and our history, from the kinder transport to the experiences of our, whether it's yourself as a first generation migrant, or in my cases, grandparents and great grandparents that came over from mainland Europe. Migration and looking for a better home is absolutely in our hearts and in everything we believe in. And I think that's why when we see the genocide in Palestine, I would always say that there is no like extra responsibility for people, and responsibility is the wrong word, moral duty to speak out on this. But I think anyone who feels that they can and is able to, this discussion, because we know, and I'm sure we'll get onto this, how often anti-Semitism has been used to shut down legitimate and important criticism of the Israeli government. And I think it's important we have that conversation. So that's kind of where we are now across a whole broad range of things. And I realize that I've kind of flitted across the surface there of lots of things, but it's largely to interest you and maybe engage you in the questions that come later along a whole broad range of issues. And so my very obvious answer that I'm coming here tonight is to say that I believe the Green Party has many of the solutions that we need to be able to fix this broken system and to move towards a better world and a better country. Now, when I talk to people about why they've not joined the Green Party yet, I feel like it's probably helpful to go straight there, because rather than just pretending everything's okay and everyone after this call is going to join the Green Party, I'd rather go straight at it and go, okay, what maybe are the barriers and what can I offer you to say we are working on this, or I'm aware of this, to move on from? So there's three things that I often hear, and I'd like to deal with those three things in these introductory remarks before I move to questions. So one, I imagine I won't hear it on this call, but it's the most frequent thing I hear, is that we're a single issue party and that there are things more important than the environment. So I'll get onto that in a moment. And the second thing is that we don't have class analysis, or there isn't enough working class voices in our party and or people from ethnic minorities or global South communities. And I'll come onto that in a moment too. And then the third thing is around what I will phrase as vibes. And I'll explain what I mean by vibes when we get to it. So let me start with the single issue party thing. This couldn't be more wrong, and I think it's probably the easiest for me to deal with tonight, because the party, ever since it was set up, and certainly under my deputy leadership, I have said repeatedly that there's no environmental justice without racial, social, and economic justice. So this sounds like just a slogan, so I'll dig into what it means. I don't think anyone should shy away from talking about the environment and the nature crisis. We know we have an existential crisis to our planet in terms of our carbon emissions, and we know that nature, we're living in one of the most depleted countries in the world. Absolutely, we need to get to human rights, but if nature doesn't have its own rights and we lose nature, everything will collapse. So I think the environment and nature, by the way, if something was just a single issue party, is a perfectly legitimate thing to care about. However, it would be completely incoherent to just care about nature or environment, because it's so intertwined with everything else. The same destructive forces that are destroying our planet are the same destructive forces that are destroying our society. And we come back to the inequality in our society, particularly around corporations. Corporations are the same things that are destroying our environment, they're destroying our democracy, and they're destroying our communities. And I would say any coherent political project needs to recognize that until we tackle the inequality in society, until we tackle the huge power and wealth that is hoarded by just a few, and until we work with working class communities, not for them, not speaking for them or amplifying them, but actually being within them, so it's not us or them, it's just us, until we do that, we'll never be able to protect the environment and the planet anyway. But of course, it's not just about the environment and the planet. We have huge social breakdown in our country, as I've spoken about already. And I guess the water companies is a very obvious example of this. Privatization has been a complete failure. And despite the fact that the majority of the British public recognise that it's been a failure, we have a Labour government that is so in hock to corporate and private and capital interests that they are more willing to sell off Thames Water, for instance, to KKR, a private equity firm, than they are to make the basic and easy case for nationalisation. We have water companies pumping sewage into our water, giving shareholders billions in dividends, and then charging us extra for all of this privilege. I could use lots of different things for examples, but I think water is probably one of the most stark examples of how sick is the only phrase I could, a word that I could find in that moment for the intention to continue to allow this to happen, to see our nature destroyed when water should be a human right. And we should ultimately be making sure that everyone can afford basic access to water and energy. But Starmer won't touch nationalisation. And even when he does on the trains, he forgot to nationalise the really important thing, the trains themselves, the rolling stock. So we see this tinkering at the edges, as opposed to going, what does a genuine socialist or radical transformative programme look like? I use the word radical there, but I also am always, when I use that word, want to point out this is just social democracy across most of Europe. And it's just that we've descended so badly in this country that it gets presented by the media as radical. And I don't mind being called radical. I think there's space for radicalism. But actually, most of what I'm talking about right now is just common sense. That actually, when the British public hear it repeatedly or hear it in effective ways, they go, you know what? That actually makes sense. And I'll come on to that in a second. In terms of racial justice, I'll just speed up with the intersectionality point here. We need to recognize that our emissions are able to reduce at this point because we benefited so much from the Industrial Revolution. But the Industrial Revolution and before did not come at a cost, and not come at a cost. It came at a cost to the global south and to the countries through empire and colonialism, and now through neo-colonialism, that we are still pillaging and extracting for oil and gas. And so you can't have this conversation about the environment without recognizing the fundamental injustices around globalization and what we need to do to make sure that not we're becoming isolationist, but actually we have allyship and relationships with our trading partners and countries that we want to work with. And yes, that includes countries that we disagree with too, because ultimately we need to build relationships that are based on diplomacy and peace. Far too often we see conversations push straight to the military industrial complex, straight to how we can invest more money in bombs and in war. This is all the same time while our schools and our hospitals are crumbling. So how about we spend more money on books and not bombs? And so what I don't want to present here is a disingenuous view of myself. I'm not a pacifist. I think there are times when a country or a nation needs to defend itself. But I also think that it's undoubtedly true that neoliberal governments and capitalist governments are making fortunes out of spending money on the military and on the money for bombs. And often it is not in their vested interests or the interests of the government, who have the same shares in those companies sometimes, to stop the wars or to move towards peace. And this isn't conjecture. The Labour government took £4.1 million just before the general election from Quadrich Capital. Quadrich Capital are a hedge fund with links to arms sales, arms companies, oil and gas companies, and gambling companies. They didn't do anything illegal, just to be clear, but they did take the money in the same week that the general election was called, and they wouldn't need to declare this fund until after the general election. I brought this up on Newsnight 3 times now, I think, and every time the presenter has let me say it, but then moved the conversation as quick as possible. I understand that's because it's partly technical and political funding is partly technical, so I'm not creating conspiracy theories here, but I do find it strange that our media don't interrogate the amount of money that the Labour government were taking from dubious companies, including Wes Streeting and the private healthcare companies. At the same time, we can very clearly see what he's going to do to the NHS. So I'm going to close these opening comments in a moment by just saying that I think it's pretty clear, I hope from now, that yes, the Green Party care about environment and nature, but we have a whole swathe of policies, from health policies to international affairs to social justice and housing. On housing, very briefly, we need to build more houses, particularly social homes and, more importantly, council homes. Right to buy under Thatcher was a disaster. That's not anyone's fault for doing it. I can understand why someone would have done it. But if we don't replace those homes again, it's been a funneling of public money that should have been used to build more council homes, but actually has gone to private developers. And I think that's why we're seeing the housing crisis. In terms of what next, I'm running to be the next leader of the Green Party, and I'm running on a campaign slogan of bold leadership now. Now, the reason why I'm saying the slogan is because those 3 words, I think, give you a very quick snapshot of why I'm running. The most important one, I think, is bold. I think the Green Party, and this comes to the vibes point that I was just talking about, sometimes is seen to be a little bit too polite, a little bit too policy focused, and hasn't really stepped up and be happy to use the megaphone. I think being considered, being articulate, and being philosophical almost has its place, and I'm perfectly willing to do that. But I think when people are angry out in the country as they are now, right now, I think if you're just angry, you're not offering solutions. But I think if you don't connect with that anger, first of all, and then offer bold solutions that are willing to challenge power and wealth, then you're not really looking to change the system. So when I say bold, this is about every time I have a megaphone, and it's not just me, it's the entire party, not just megaphone or microphone or in a council chamber or indeed in parliament, that we are stepping up and speaking truth to power and speaking boldly, even when it's difficult and even when it's tricky, because I believe we're not speaking for ourselves, we're speaking for millions of people in this country who are suffering. There are 2.3 million people using food banks, for over 3 million people living in fuel poverty, for over 300,000 people who are homeless. These are the people we need to speak up for. When I talk about leadership, that's obviously it's about my leadership, but actually more importantly, it's about the country's leadership. I'm really excited when I think about the next cohort of Green MPs, that I want some of those people to be people who haven't even joined the Green Party yet, because right now they're community leaders. There's someone who's running a food bank. There's someone who's volunteering at a school. And if you said right now, would you get involved in politics? They'd be like, no, that doesn't make a difference. And it's just not something I'm interested in. I really want us as a party to inspire those people because, and this might sound strange to people, I think Nigel Farage has the ability to inspire them. I think with his anti-establishment rhetoric and sense that he really wants to change things, there's a dangerous space where he can connect with some of those people and convince them that the political system needs shifting, and he's got the answers to do that. I agree with some of the problems he's identifying there. The political system does need shifting, but it doesn't need shifting with more toxicity and more divisiveness. It needs shifting with practical solutions for change. And so I want to be reaching out to communities and seeing grassroots organizing. Jeremy Corbyn, under his project, started to do this. He had a community organizing unit. I think that's a really exciting idea that I want to really see how, as a Green Party that is less resourced, but if there are seeds of an idea in there that we can look on and move on. And I believe lots of local Green parties are already doing this idea. Of course, as soon as Keir Starmer started, the community organising unit was one of the first things he shut down. And that's because, as we know, he wanted the top-down politics. I think real leadership is moving away from top-down politics, away from politics that's obsessed with just Westminster. Yes, of course, we need to win more MPs, but we need to win more MPs by being embedded in our communities and then sending genuine activists and genuine people in the community to Parliament. And then very finally, finishing my introductory remarks, now. Why do I say now? Because we can't wait until the next general election. We got nearly 2 million votes at the last election. That's good. It's a good start and it's a good foundation, but we need to do so much more. People are suffering right now and we do not have time to waste. And so the very final thing I'd say, I'm sure there'll be a question about this, but we know there's lots of talks about independence and lots of talks about left-wing parties. I'm pleased to see anyone who's going to challenge the duopoly of the Labour Party and the Conservative Party, who I think are in such a narrow political space that I think we need to all be challenging that. But at the same time, there is a party right now who is a party of the left, who has over 800 councillors, 4 MPs, nearly 2 million votes. And there's a leadership election happening right now where I'm running explicitly on the ticket that I've just spoken to you about now. Joining the Green Party right now, and I'd love to see some of those independents join the Green Party, sends a clear message that we are ready to unite. We are there ready to take the fight, both to this failing Labour government and challenge reform and Nigel Farage. And I think that's the way we're going to change our towns. I think that's the way we change our cities. And I think that's the way together we can change the country. So thank you very much for having me. I'm looking forward to your questions.
Thanks very much, Zack. That's been great. I think you win the prize for the most words spoken in the shortest time. But we got the messages very clear. Thanks very much, Zack. So we're going to turn to questions now. And the first question's from Colin Chalon. Can you ask your question?
Thank you. Thank you, Zack. You packed an awful lot in there, and I'm not quite sure at the end of it what message I'm going to take home with me. As a Labour MP in 2009, I very briefly considered joining the Green Party, crossing the floor. But what stopped me was two things. First of all was tribalism, which I'm sure still plenty of older Labour Party members will still hold dear. The other thing was that I thought that environmentalism had to be in the mainstream of politics. It had to be made appealing to people. And the only way I thought at the time was to do that in the sense of staying in the Labour Party and trying to make the Labour Party do more than simply the Climate Change Act, which was very good, but to actually proceed from that, to actually develop the policies and present them. Unfortunately, as we know now, LINO, Labour in name only, is clearly not pursuing that path. I'm just putting it to you that the Green Party is not really seen as the insurgent party, not in the same way as Nigel Farage and Reform. This insurgence seems to be quite appealing to a lot of people. How do you respond to that? How can you make the Green Party fresh again, if you don't mind me saying that it might be a little bit, it's been around the block a few times already. And when it does get the grip on power, it tends to go into coalitions that does it no good at all. I mean, Brighton, Germany, other places one could mention.
Okay, thank you, Colin. Zach.
Yes, thank you very much, Colin. So I think a few things there. The first is I'll take the open invitation for what message should you take away, because I realized I probably didn't say the most important thing that I've come here to say. So thank you for pointing that out. Anyone who joins the Green Party before July 31st gets a vote in this leadership election. So I suppose what I'm saying is even, I'm hoping that people are entirely convinced that by what I'm going to say. I'm pragmatic enough to understand that people still have questions, and to be honest, I think people should still have questions, even politicians, or sometimes I hear them say something and I go, don't quite agree with that, but the thrust of what they're saying. So I'd say to anyone on this call that if you agree with the majority of what I'm saying and think there's something in it, then joining the Green Party before July 31st, I think, is a real definitive step you can take right now to making some of the things that I say happen. Also, where I think we differ from the Labour Party, to come to your question directly, is that we are not top down. We are one member, one vote. So at our national party conference, any member, and I literally mean any member, whether they've been in the party 20 years, 7 years like I have, or they join the party straight after this Zoom call, just a subtle hint there, they can come up with policy. And if they can find a small group of people, I think it's between 12 and 15 people, to create a policy with them and sign it, that then goes to every single member in the country. They vote on the prioritization order. Sorry, this is a bit technical. It then goes to the conference floor and it's one member, one vote. We know that Labour kind of mimic that in some ways in terms of having votes, but there's plenty of examples where the membership have voted for one thing and Starmer just went, nope, not doing that, and moved on. More specifically to your point, I was on a panel last week with an MP I admire greatly, which is John McDonald. And he got up and he gave one of the saddest speeches I've ever heard an MP give. He basically said, I'm paraphrasing now because I've not memorized it word for word, but he was saying that it was his hardest week in decades of being an MP to ever be a Labour MP, both because of the benefit cuts. It was the week of Enoch Powell, not week of Enoch Powell, the week that Keir Starmer echoed Enoch Powell, and of course the genocide in Gaza. And then he had a long pause, and I genuinely had a moment in my mind where I thought, is John McDonnell about to join the Green Party in front of me? Because this is very exciting. Sadly, he didn't do that. His actual thing he said was, but I need to stay in the Labour Party and fight. Now, I'm not going to criticise John for saying that. I can only imagine what it's like to have been so institutionalised, or that sounds like a disrespectful word. I don't mean that. To have been so part of a furniture of the party that to let go or move on to something else, it must feel so incredibly traumatic and emotionally wrenching. But we also know that Jeremy Corbyn managed to get on the ballot almost by accident the last time, because MPs who then, certainly screwed him over afterwards, said they just put him on there for the debate and then regretted it. And we know the rules have now been changed, so that actually it's very unlikely that a left-wing Labour MP could ever be on the ballot again. And that was even just a few years ago when Clive Lewis, who is someone, again, I admire greatly, but I wouldn't say, I would say he's strongly left-wing, but he's not like a radical left candidate. Again, it's just social democracy. And he couldn't even make it on the ballot because MPs wouldn't support his vision for the party. We know since then lots of right-wing Labour MPs have won, and they are now in Parliament. And so I think the idea that the party is ever going to be a theory of change or a way of changing things for people is things that people need to let go of. And it's not for me to tell people that, which is why I'm cautious when I say that. But I think people are increasingly in numbers coming to that conclusion. So then I go, well, what's your theory of change? And I think the Green Party is the obvious. In terms of the insurgency, What I would say is, since I announced that I was running to be leader of the Green Party, which was 3 weeks ago, I've done over 35 national media interviews. Laura Kuenssberg, Sky News. Tomorrow morning, I'm on the Jeremy Vine show for a couple of hours. Now, I don't have a huge truck with these mainstream media organizations. I don't think they give us a fair hearing a lot of the time. But I do think it's an example of when you're bold and when you're clear about what you stand for, you become more interesting to the media. They know what character you are in the kind of scheme of things. And I think your question was very instructive. The Green parties around Europe, many of whom I do support and I think are doing good things, but many, such as the German Greens, are highly questionable, to put it mildly. And I think when you have that broad spectrum of what a party is, the media don't really know what to do with it, because it's a bit like the Lib Dems. They have 72 MPs now. I would totally take 72 MPs, and so I'm not being disingenuous. Many of you will know that before the Green Party, I was in the Lib Dems for a short period of time. I want people to do that journey. I want people to come from other parties and come to the Green Party because they recognise the left-wing party has the policies we need. So I think some of those 72 MPs in the Lib Dems are probably okay, but I know lots of them are not okay. I know lots of them are free market liberals, including Ed Davey, who wrote the Orange Book that led to the coalition and austerity, whereas people like Layla Moran, I would say, are more on the left of the party. The media don't really know what to do with them because there's not a coherent narrative there about what do the Lib Dems stand for. And that's why Ed Davey's been driven to doing these ridiculous stunts, which I know get them attention. But are they really changing political discourse? Was there any point in having 72 MPs? I really don't know what they're doing or what they're achieving. So I'm very aware that by being very clear about what I think the Green Party should stand for, that can alienate people. That could make people go, oh, that's not actually what I support. But you know what? I think if you try and be a cup of tea for everyone, then you're essentially a mug, right? And I think you need to be really clear about what it is that you stand for and what are your principles, not in a way that deliberately alienates people. I do believe in speaking in ways that people will find reasonable and can create the broadest church. But even churches have walls, and I think being clear about the things we don't stand for is exactly how the media become more interested. Sorry, I'm going to sneeze. I don't think that's necessarily an insurgent force, but I also think insurgency can only take you so far because often that creates boom and bust. I do think sustained growth is where the party's been at, and actually the Green Party, the only party in the last 8 years that have made net gains in every single local election. Just to finish up, my only argument though now is incremental change will not cut it. Nigel Farage is demonstrating what it looks like when you put your foot on the accelerator. Terrible metaphor, but forgive me. I think we need to right now be recognizing that the scale of the crises facing us, from a nature and climate crisis, the racist riots we've seen on streets last summer, and the deepening inequality in society, mean we need to step up. But I don't think that's about policy as much as our communications. And that's why I think communications is something that in this leadership election, everyone should be talking about.
Okay, we're going to sort of press on at a slightly faster rate.
I'll give shorter answers, sorry.
You won't be able to come back and say all the things that you want to say, because we have got a good, how long have we got left? Well, plenty of time. We've got nearly an hour left. So Rika, it's lovely to see you and be good to hear your question.
Thank you. And thanks very much, JVL, for inviting Zack, and Zack for accepting the invitation. I'm sort of ahead of the game in some ways, in the sense that I have joined, and I didn't leave the Labour Party. They left me quite definitely by rescinding my membership, and I don't regret that. And actually, since then, I've been very glad, after drifting around a little bit, to decide that I'm at home in the Green Party, and I've read your pitch for leadership, and there's not very much that I'm not happy about. So my question is, at the end of your pitch, you're talking a lot about, well, to a certain extent, the funding coming from the membership. And of course, the membership has to grow. I don't doubt that. But I just thought it was a little bit idealistic. And I wondered, I'm not sure how the Labour Party is going to ever justify continuing to receive affiliation fees from trade unions, or either how trade unions are going to continue to justify paying affiliation fees to the Labour Party, because the Labour Party, as far as I can see, is a spent force now for the people of the country. So what I wondered was where I don't think there's enough membership to get the kind of really big funding that the Labour Party has been accustomed to with trade union affiliations, or where very rich people like the Conservatives and the horrible Reform Party are getting their money from bribes and other unscrupulous sources, as well as people who are rich and who know that that is the side that they want to stay with. So is there some other or additional means which are going to be available, particularly in view of the fact that we don't have any more time, Zack? The time has to be now. We have to move forward in the right direction just as speedily as we can. Thank you.
Thank you, Rika. I guess I'm going to start by disagreeing with your question and then answer your question as if I agreed with it. So I suppose where I disagree is I don't think it's idealistic. I think it's exactly what our country needs. And I think Labour saw this under Jeremy Corbyn, that if you can inspire a country to create a mass movement, then actually huge amounts of money comes in. And I think we saw that under Bernie Sanders in America. And I saw AOC say something which really struck me the other day. She's doing a tour of America. I'm sure you know about this, for Smash the Oligarchy tour. And she said that your small donations of $5 or $10 are exactly what frees me to not accept corporate money. It frees me and the party to not have to take vested interests, and it frees me and the party to make sure every decision is made on behalf of the members and not capital. I will answer your question more directly in a moment, but I suppose I just wanted to put that caveat in that this isn't about my ego trip. So I'm not suggesting that I'm the person who goes out there and everyone goes, we're going to give loads of money to the Green Party now. What I am hoping, though, is that I can be a vehicle to activate all of those communities, all of those people around the country to go, actually, the Green Party is now worth this investment. It's now worth this conversation. And I don't think that is out of reach. I think we've had moments where we've started to catch that wave. And I think we're in a moment now where we're just very lightly on that wave, and it could actually quite quickly happen. What I accept in your question, though, is it's not happening at the moment and we're running out of time. So I'll come on to your question more directly. I've met quite a few of the trade unions, especially during the general election. I had meetings with a lot of the senior leadership of the trade unions. And what really struck me that won't be a surprise to you is the difference between what some of them were saying and what their members are saying when I go out on the picket line and I talk to the workers. And I think this situation is only sustainable for so long, where you have such a big gap between the decisions the trade union officials or senior people are making and what the members pay their fees for or are involved in collective organising community for. And I think, again, another danger for the country, because we really need trade unions and we need collective bargaining and organisation. So one step I'm going to constantly do is to keep talking to the workers in trade unions, to keep working with them. Also, anyone who's here who's already a member of the Green Party, one thing our Green Party trade union group is constantly asking people to do is, if you're in a trade union, be vocal about the fact that you're in the Green Party. Very often the Green Party has, and it's a lovely quality, this kind of humble quality where people are a bit shy to say they're in the Green Party. And I think the more that people speak up in spaces that haven't traditionally been Green Party spaces and say, you know what, I'm part of the Green Party, and actually the Green Party policies are supporting the things we're working for here, so get involved with the Green Party, I think that starts to shift the conversation. More widely, though, as well, I often think when I talk about, we don't have billionaire backers. Just yesterday, Dale Vince tweeted me to say that he agreed with something I'd said on TV about wealth tax and shared the video. I'm not saying that I necessarily accept money tomorrow from Dale Vince, but I do think the party needs to be open about, if money is coming from clean or legitimate sources, then the money itself is not the problem. The source of the money is the important thing. But what I think needs to be the fundamental principle that I won't shy away from is that in the Green Party, we only have two vested interests, and that's protecting people and protecting the planet. And I don't mean that in an idealistic way. I mean that in the way that I think any political party that wants to change this country can only have those two vested interests. Because I think as soon as you start to try and juggle more balls or try and have more conversations, I think that's when you start to trip up and to compromise yourself. I don't mean me, but I mean the party more widely. So I think your challenge is really fair, and I think it's one of the biggest challenges the party faces is political funding, because of the way the entire system is set up. And that's why the first place I want to go is creating a mass movement and inspiring people to join and donate what they can. So actually the things we're building are from the membership and the grassroots,
Okay,
rather than
we're
accepting money top down.
We're going to move on
Thank
to
you.
the next question. Bear in mind that we've got, say, another 10 questions coming.
Sorry. They're complicated questions. Ask the easy question.
No, I do understand.
I'm joking.
And Richard.
Thank you very much. I almost joined the Green Party in 2015 when Jeremy Corbyn came along, and many years were spent doing other things, but the right kind of things. We're now in a position where there's a huge ferment on the left of tens of thousands of people not knowing where to go, how to turn, how to organize, working in communities, working in different ways, in communities like Islington, where they have an independent MP, or elsewhere. There are a number of independent MPs. And what concerns me is how the Green Party intends to collaborate with this variety of forces. Saying, join us, is the same as Labour said for 50, 60 years of my political life. And I don't think that's the right answer. And what I want you to explain is how you actually collaborate with forces who are not here and now going to join the Greens, but on the issue of Palestine, on the issue of immigration, on the issue of child poverty, or whatever it is, share precisely the same politics. And I think this is very widespread in the country. There are plenty of people who share these politics, and the problem is how to bring them all together in united political forces. In some areas, the Greens are the answer, I'm sure of it. But in other areas, in Islington, I think it's insane to run Green candidates against someone like Jeremy Corbyn. In many other areas, I don't think Green candidates can be the answer. But the feeling I get from talking to people on the ground is that the Greens will not give up on running a candidate in every constituency. First past the post is an insane system, and running against people who share your politics is an absolute guarantee of defeat for the politics we all want to introduce. How does the Greens see this? What are they doing to bridge those divides, to work together with other people without saying the only answer is join us? I'll probably join to vote for you anyway, but I want an answer to the more general political question. Thanks.
Thanks, Richard. And I will try and keep my answers shorter, but again, it's a complicated question. First of all, thank you for saying you'll join to vote for me. Hopefully you still will by the end of this answer. The first thing I would do is challenge you back, to be honest. If people, you said, share our politics precisely, then the actual insane thing to me is that they don't join the Green Party. The Green Party are growing. We have a democratic mechanism. So it's one policy, one member, one vote. Even if they didn't precisely share our politics, there are ways of changing the politics within the party. For me, the fracturing is coming from people saying, oh, I totally agree with everything the Green Party stands for. I guess Andrew Feinstein is an example, someone I admire greatly, someone I've met lots of times and shared a panel with. But his answer to me has always been, I'm not a party man. But I actually think if you saying I'm not a party man is what you're willing to say, that means that the left can't unite around a political project that can stop fascism in its wake. I think that's problematic in itself. So I will come to your question more directly and more cooperatively. But I do want to meet the challenge with the same level of challenge that I actually think it's time to stop pissing around and for people just to go, actually, you know what? The Green Party are offering a really powerful platform here that is genuinely democratic, genuinely grassroots. And even if I don't love every single aspect of it, it's time to go, actually, this is the place to go forward. Some of this links to what Rico was just asking me in the last question. At the last election, we got 2 million votes. That was because we stood everywhere. Every single vote you get across the country, and I know that lots of people don't know this, results in something called short money, which is money that you get in Parliament that is vital to the party running. I think the party, I can't remember the exact amount, got nearly between £1.5 million and £2 million for policy development because we got those 2 million votes. In 2019, we stood down in lots of places to create an alliance. And actually what that resulted in was huge financial cost to the party, huge cost to the party in terms of media time because we weren't taken as a serious party, huge cost to the party in terms of polling. And I'll tell you one thing that really, really breaks my heart, that if someone's not in the Green Party, I can understand why they won't identify with this. But I'm giving you the very honest answer here. It's when people follow me because they've seen me on a podcast or an interview and they go, you know what, I really identify with everything you're saying and I can't wait to vote Green. And then on election day, I get between 200 to 500 messages every election day, not just general elections much more, but on local elections, of people messaging me going, I was so excited to vote Green for the first time but there was no Green on the ballot. There was no one to vote for. And actually, I think it's idealistic to assume that if there wasn't a Green on the ballot, these people would just vote independent. We know people don't vote like that. And lots of people wouldn't vote for independent because they want to see a party manifesto. So the cooperative part of my answer is I want to work with anyone who wants to see a change to neoliberalism, who wants to see a change to the status quo. And I'll continue to have those conversations and to continue having an open door. But it would also seem insane, to use your words, to have any other strategy right now when I'm running for leader of a party, and indeed when I'm leader of a party, to say to Liam Mohammed, to say to Zara Sultana, to say to Nadia Whittam, to say to Andrew Feinstein, you align with our politics, join the Green Party, the Labour Party, to coin a phrase that's been used tonight. You're not leaving the Labour Party has left you. And I understand Faiza Shaheen has said to me in public that it's really important to her on the doorstep that she's able to say, as an independent MP, she could vote how she wants. The Green Party doesn't have a whip. If you're in the Green Party, as long as you align with our core values of environmental, social, racial, and economic justice, then you can vote for how you want. So it seems to me, this is why I talked about vibes at the beginning. Vibes is the only thing that's stopping the left uniting and joining the Green Party. And so my argument is, rather than trying to change vibe outside the Green Party and create what's becoming a messy situation, actually let's change the vibes in the Green Party and make it the home of the left.
Okay, Pamela. See if you can keep your question relatively short, Pamela, and then you can model that for Zack.
Thank you. Okay, I've got 2 points I want to make. The first is the big one about the climate crisis. I'm apologizing, I haven't read your program on it, but what we're witnessing is the competition between states on selling fossil fuels, selling renewables, keeping on extracting carbon emissions, which are, as we all know, massively endangering our life. Now, I'm a socialist and a communist, and my answer is to that all these things have to be taken into public ownership. Otherwise, it's impossible to ameliorate or shift the climate crisis. So that's my first point. My second point is that JVL was formed in order to give the lie to conflating anti-Semitism with anti-Zionism. And that's why we are here. And therefore to support or defend Jeremy, who was sacked over this issue, saying that the exaggeration of anti-Semitism in the Labour Party was false. Yeah, so what I'm wondering is that I know that you do or did support the IHRA definition, which conflates those two things. And I'm wondering if you still do, and B, if you don't, what made you change? Thank you.
Thanks very much, Pamela. 2 easy questions again. On the climate crisis, I have to say one of the reasons why I've not spoken about this much on the call this evening is because I imagine that most people know if I'm running for leader of the Green Party, the climate crisis is going to be central to some of that platform. But you're right to ask me about it too. We absolutely need to reduce our emissions. We know that net zero is failing in the public's eye. We know that the public largely support climate action. What they don't support is the idea that this is going to fall on people who can least afford to pay for it and working class communities. And they are right to do that. And in fact, I tried to communicate this with the New Statesman recently. And they came out with the headline that I'm the eco-populist against net zero. It's not an entirely accurate headline. We need to get to net zero, but ultimately we need to do it by making sure multimillionaires and billionaires and the polluters pay. The fact that the Labour government were putting up £28 billion in public investment before they ran for election, that wasn't even enough to begin with, but then they still scrapped that. So you're absolutely right in terms of the role the public sector need to play here. We could insulate every single home in Britain that needs it. That would both reduce emissions, vital in the climate crisis, but it would also reduce people's bills, vital in a cost of living crisis, and also create the good green jobs, exactly what you're talking about here, that could be in the public sector, that could be organised within trade unions, where we're making sure people are getting decent wages and they're getting decent working conditions at work. Aside from that, there's things like the Rosebank oil field, completely unacceptable. This would be 28 of the poorest countries, equivalent of the 28 poorest countries' emissions, all combined. The fact we're doing this in a climate crisis when we need to keep fossil fuels under the ground is completely unacceptable. To be fair to the Labour government, I don't often say that, but that's under appeal at the moment, and we don't entirely know where their position is. But before they got in government, their position certainly wasn't to say we'd reject Rosebank. So I've not seen any evidence they're going to move on that. More widely to your point, though, we could be nationalising the energy companies. That makes complete sense. The energy companies would absolutely hate that, but that would reduce our bills. We could also be looking at community energy, so the people within those communities could be getting money back in feed-in tariff, where they could be spending that on community projects. I see that not just as important for the climate crisis, but as a way of tackling the far right and fascism. Because actually, if you know your neighbours, because you're working with them within the community around money and community energy, I think that's exactly how we rebuild community spaces. That's a much more complicated answer, but that's kind of brushing across that. On the IHRA, this is nuanced and I think often gets misreported. So I'm going to slow my speech down because it's a bit more technical. I'm really proud of what the Green Party did on this, and I think it's not often known. So there was a time where people were being really pressured to adopt the IHRA definition. And in the Green Party, we didn't do that. What we did was we adopted, I think it's 8 or 9 definitions by Jewish academics. Now, the whole point of this, and I know JVL resonates with this, is to challenge the idea that there is a single Jewish community, or that the Jewish community is homogenous, or the idea that one single Jewish academic should have a monopoly on how we as Jewish people experience anti-Semitism, or how we as Jewish people experience everyday life. So the point was the IHRA was one definition that was being called for, but there was lots of other definitions too, such as the Jerusalem Declaration. Now, I often get criticized by, I'm putting in inverted commas here, mainstream Jewish organizations like the Board of Deputies, the Jewish London Forum, who say to me it is incoherent to adopt or to bring in the IHRA at the same time as Jerusalem Declaration because they're completely competing definitions. And my argument is that's the entire point. These things are complicated, these things are nuanced, and no one should have a monopoly on this definition. So the point is, when we talk about what is anti-Semitism, I would like that the people, if they're not Jewish and they're considering, is this anti-Semitism or not, take in a broad range of views from different Jewish communities and different Jewish academics from different Jewish philosophical backgrounds and go, on balance, what are we talking about here? I'm really proud of that. I think that's an incredibly... It's complicated to explain, and I wish there was a quicker way to do it, particularly when I'm on the media. But I think anti-Semitism requires that nuance. Our Jewish communities require that nuance. I can't stand it when someone is on TV or radio saying they're speaking for the Jewish community. Rarely are they speaking for me in the way that I would want to speak. And I'm always really careful when an interviewer asks about the fact that I'm Jewish. One of the first caveats I put in is that this is my opinion as someone who happens to be Jewish, but I'm not speaking as a representative of the Jewish community. By the way, I know I don't need to say this, but I also think it's important that in the Muslim community, they have the same experience where you have competing organizations or different groups who claim that they can speak for Islamophobia, or they can claim to speak for all Muslim people. And I just think it's really eroding trust and nuance in our politics, as opposed to going, what does it look like when we bring nuance to this conversation? And I don't think we have nuance by adopting one definition, no matter how much we like it. We have nuance by having a whole range of views in the conversation.
Okay, thanks, Zack.
Palestine. Okay.
Sorry. I'm hoping that it's wonderful that people have got so many questions. People are coming up so easily with questions to ask you, and I'm really delighted about that. But I really want to make sure that everybody who has currently put up their hand gets to ask their question. Before I call on you, Agnes, I just wanted to make a comment because I think it was around the idea of net zero. I hope that the Green Party's notion of net zero is quite different from Keir Starmer's notion of net zero, which includes fantasy solutions like carbon capture and storage. And I think that at some point needs to be made absolutely clear. Many people that I work with will not use the phrase net zero because it is a greenwashing phrase. But I'll leave that perhaps for a discussion.
I suppose the thing I'd just respond very quickly is if we want to capture carbon and we don't want to use magic technologies, let's plant some trees. They're the best carbon capture we can think of, a nature-based solution. So absolutely, it's just another excuse for disaster capitalism and to make more money.
And the most important for sustainability is reduce. That means
Yes,
cut
absolutely.
out fossil fuels and cut out the level of consumption that we have. Agnes.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you. So it's a little bit the Richard Cooper theme, but I would like to bring a more detailed example, and I'm interested in your opinion. So I'm from Camden, and the Greens stood two candidates last time, a year ago, one for Hampstead and Highgate and one for Holborn. The Hampstead and Highgate candidate, Lorna, used to be Labour, and I knew her very, very well because I used to be Labour until a year ago. An amazing candidate, got fed up and went to the Greens. So she was the Hampstead and Highgate candidate. The Holborn candidate was David Sandel, or something like that.
Daniel.
Now, although the Greens, your party, put Lorna forward, but because of lack of money, they decided that they're not going to campaign for her. I was the only person who campaigned for Lorna Russell in my constituency, almost 24/7. That was crazy because she used to be in that constituency as a Labour, and lots of people knew her. And so I asked David, the Holborn candidate, to step down because Andrew Feldstein seemed to have a pretty good possibility, but he refused, saying that it's only the Green Party who knows how, what, and when. So at the end, Lorna had a few thousand votes. She should have had a lot more if I wasn't the only campaigner for her. And David didn't have all that much either. That could have gone to Andrew Feinstein. So what I'm saying is, what's the point of standing candidates if you actually cannot afford to campaign for her or him? And all it does is taking away, yeah, hang on, I'm now getting muddled up with my own thought process, but I'm sure you understand what I'm talking about. I hope.
Thank you,
Thank you,
Agnes.
Agnes.
And thank you for the kind words about Lorna as well. I'm a huge fan as well. She's great.
Sorry?
Thank you for your kind words about Lorna, because I'm a huge fan as well. She's great.
Perfect.
Yeah. I think part of this, part one, comes to what I said to Rika before, the conversation about money, that standing candidates means that we get short money. And so because we don't have a lot of money in the party, because we don't have billionaire backers, standing in every seat and every single vote actually counts. The second thing I would say is about democracy. So even where we've sent clear signals, and I would say, you know, Sheridan Cates is the woman who stood against Jeremy Corbyn, for instance. She would say very openly she's a huge fan of Jeremy Corbyn. There's an amazing shot where Jeremy Corbyn gets re-elected as MP for Islington North, and no one is celebrating more in the shot than Sheridan Cates just behind her with a green rosette on, who's really happy that she won. And we were making it clear when we spoke to people that we were standing, but it was essentially a non-aggression pact. So rather than not standing at all and taking away people's democratic choice, you're standing, but you're not actively campaigning, because what you're recognizing is that there's a candidate here that if they win, that would be great. But also what you're doing is giving people the democratic choice to be able to vote Green if for whatever reason they don't want to vote for the candidate. And also because all of those seats across the country all add to the money that the party needs and adds to the polling. And just to be clear, because I've given this answer, I think twice or three times tonight, I hate this system. The first past the post system is absolutely ridiculous and really, really needs changing. And it creates absurd outcomes, as what I'm saying now. But also, I think what I'm saying now is also the most pragmatic response to a first past the post system where parties get money and are incentivized to stand. And if you don't stand, your polling comes down, your national polling, and then you lose the little media airtime you do have. And the country or the national media treat you less seriously as a political party. The reason why in the general election we got so much more airtime than we've ever had before was because we stood in every seat. Now, we knew that we couldn't win every seat, and we were very clear with the media. They sometimes couldn't believe it. We were just saying, we're only going to win 4, and these are the 4 we're targeting. So if you look at other seats, there is amazing community campaigning going on elsewhere. I can see Joe is on the call about to ask a question. Joe's doing amazing things in the world. There's lots of other community campaigns where I'm glad they were still in their community and they were still working hard there, but they weren't resourced by the National Party in the way they would need to, I would say, to really be able to win and get over the line. Although, again, that can change if you move away from a top-down approach. So the summary answer is the party cannot afford to campaign in every seat to win. The party can't even afford to campaign in most seats to be able to win. We have to be really clear about where we target. I think this comes to the core of this leadership campaign, though. I think my opponents are standing on a kind of incremental change. They're saying 4 MPs has been great. Maybe we'll get to 9 or 10 MPs. I don't think that's good enough for what we need to. I'm looking at 30 to 50 MPs because I really want us to hold the balance of power with a failing Labour government, because I think that's how we get the voting system changed. And in future calls, we never need to have these conversations again, because we can have proportional representation where deals can so much more easily be made.
Okay, Ruth? Ruth, we can't hear you.
Sorry, I did vote Green at the last by-election, although I'm a member of the Labour Party, so I'll probably be excommunicated for doing that. But anyway, I'm a bit suspicious of the Greens because in the early days, they seemed to be more Tories in the Greens than socialists. And I think that with this first past the post system, we should be having a joint alliance between Greens and socialists. Why wouldn't that work? Why would people not join a socialist party but join the Greens? Because then it makes me think, well, they're not really socialists and they're going to sell us down the river, you know? And I think a lot of people feel that. Will any socialist vote Green? No, they'll vote for a socialist candidate.
Thanks, Ruth.
That's it.
Zack?
It's hard to give an answer to this without, I definitely don't mean this disrespectfully in any way, but there's lots of by-elections where socialists stand against the Green Party, and socialists sometimes, I think, in a recent by-election got 19 votes and the Greens won the by-election with a socialist candidate. And I think it's just a case of the Green Party has the history in place and the mechanism to be a party that can win. I'm not disrespecting the Socialist Party. It might be that they get to that place too, but I'm not here to speak on behalf of the Socialist Party. I'm here to speak on behalf of the Green Party. So I'm not disingenuous. There are definitely groups within the Green Party, and there are people within whom their politics is different to mine. But ultimately, we're a broad church. Even in broad churches have walls. I'd say the Labour Party has such a broad church that there are people in that party that I definitely could not be in a party with and wouldn't countenance being in a party with. That's not my experience in the Green Party. So whilst there are certainly people in the party who I would say wouldn't identify as socialists, I believe that, I don't have evidence for this, but the vast majority of people, or at least a huge chunk of people, are socialists within the Green Party. And I guess we're about to find that out in this leadership election.
Yeah. Okay, I'm a socialist and I'm in the Green Party. You describe yourself as a socialist, Zack?
Yeah, I don't often.
I mean, that's where I met you most recently, was at the Jewish Socialist Group Hanukkah party.
Yeah, I find terms, so the answer to your question is yes, I'm not dodging the question. I also find terms can do more to put people off because they have ideas of what terms mean. So I much prefer to talk about inequality and redistributing wealth from multimillionaires and billionaires, and making sure we're lifting up working class people or amplifying their voices and working within their communities. For me, that is socialism. And so if someone says that you're a socialist, the answer is yes. But also I find labels often to the most of the public, they don't know what these labels mean, and I think it can just alienate people.
Amanda.
Okay. Since the turn of the century, I've voted Green more often than I've voted for anything else. I've also loaned money to the party. I was consulted about whether they should adopt the IHRA, and I argued fiercely against it and completely failed. And I'm thoroughly irritated still. But by voting, but I recognise that the Jerusalem Declaration didn't arrive on the scene fast enough, and that might have been one of the reasons people gradually sort of shifted into thinking, well, we want to acknowledge anti-Semitism, so let's do this. I do vote Green quite often, even though I never get a leaflet, I never meet a Green candidate or anything in Camden. And I'm particularly disappointed when it's local elections, because there I feel that the Greens could actually get in if they, you know, if I had any contact with them or if there was any way to organise for them. But I'm mainly concerned that both here and in your interview that appeared on the JVL blog, you've said that you're going to stand candidates against people like Clive Lewis, Zara Sultana, all these people that we really rely on. And I'm and you've now explained that there's a kind of monetary motive for it. But I'm sorry, I'm just not impressed. I don't think you should do that. I think you should have a pact, or you should try to get together with them. I know that when I was campaigning for Andrew Feinstein, we tried pretty hard to get the Greens to come in with us or to have some kind of pact, and they absolutely refused. And now I can see there's money in it, but I think, you'd do better with getting a lot of donations from individuals instead of trying to get this money.
So I think you might have misread and maybe misheard tonight. I'm not saying that we are standing a candidate in every seat. What I'm saying is that those people who are thinking of standing against the Green Party should join the Green Party. It's not my decision about who stands where or what stands, in the same
But
way
they're
as you've
not
had
going to, are they? Are you saying that Andrew Feinstein should be in the Green Party?
Absolutely. It's insane to me that he's not. What policy does he have that is different to the Green Party? But the question often gets put to me, but actually I would argue the question should be put to Andrew. Why are you not joining the Green Party? Why are we having this constant repetitive conversation?
But why did we have to have a contest at all? Why couldn't we both have gone into,
Yep.
just
But why not join the party that already exists and that you agree with? I've never heard a good reason from Andrew or anyone why not join the Green Party.
Because I value independence in the parliament as well. I think it's really important to have a range of different politics inside our parliament.
And I think that's where we have a fundamental.
I'm going to have to move on to the next question.
Okay.
Thank you. Joe.
Hi guys, it's really good to be in this meeting. I'm so thankful and grateful for Jewish Voice for Labour for defending me twice when I was suspended by the Labour Party for no good reason. And then finally, we all know the Labour Party changed the rules and expelled hundreds of people like me retrospectively. And I was independent for 4 months, and I tried to recruit other people to stand as independent councillors and failed. It's really difficult to stand as an independent. It takes a lot of a machine to get elected. And we do live, unfortunately, under a first past the post system. And so we have to target our resources, campaign where we can win. Otherwise, we spread ourselves too thin and we're just pissing in the wind, basically. As the election results show, generally, there are some special exceptions. I'll come to them. So I stood as Green candidate for Birkenhead MP last year's general election. We came second. We beat Reform in every single part of our constituency. That's how we beat Reform, is we're active, we campaign, we get on the front foot, we put out the green messages of hope. We can have a fairer, greener community and society. And the Jewish Labour movement continued their attacks against me. They called for me and other former Labour councillors who had joined the Green Party to be removed as candidates. And if that had happened in the Labour Party, I would have been suspended like that. You know that, we know that. But the Green Party defended me. I carried on as a candidate. Not only that, Zack came up to my ward, stood next to me, shoulder to shoulder, and defended me and campaigned with me. That's the kind of backing we get as socialists within the Green Party. You can't beat it. And there's certainly nothing else that compares to it. By the way, we came second in Birkenhead with 20% of the vote, and we're intending to win next time because we need a whole load of good Green MPs to counter the huge number of Reform MPs that we're likely to have unless we unite, unless we stop pissing about, excuse my language, but like it just okay, I do think there are some special circumstances. There's 5 independent MPs, there's 4 Green MPs, and where there are those 5 independent MPs, I do think you may have special circumstances for them to get re-elected to carry on campaign and so on. But otherwise, it looks to me like left-wing is self-indulgent privilege. It's a philosophical moot point. Should we compete against each other? There's loads of constituencies that are crying out for strong, decent, socialist and eco-minded, environmentally friendly candidates. We can support those people where they want to stand in all kinds of constituencies in an election campaign. We are all part of the same movement, the same social movement. But when it comes to elections, we have to deal with first past the post and target and focus our resources. And it's not only about us and what we personally think and what we've personally experienced in one Green Party or another. The Green Party is very patchy across the country, I'm not going to lie. It's not strong everywhere. There's other constituencies where I am where Reform beat Greens, and that's not okay, and we have to change that around next time too. But it's not only about us and our local experience or personal experience, it's about our future. It's about our children, our grandchildren, and it's also about Palestinians, and it's about this global turning point where we're at, where, human rights is getting destroyed before our eyes. The whole infrastructure that was set up after the Holocaust, so it couldn't happen again, it's going, and we all know this. We've all been on the protests and cry about it because it's just horrendous what's happening there. And Zack, in interview after interview, has nailed the anti-Semitism smear. It's nailed conflating Israel with pro-Palestinian protests, partly because he's Jewish, but also because he speaks so well, and he's done it over and over again. And we're not going to get a better opportunity than this. Zack is a great Jewish leader of a major political party that we can make much more major by uniting. But you don't have to join if you really don't want to, but freaking hell, you've got to have a really good reason not to. Like, get with the pro. I don't mean that. I mean, now is the time. I'm really passionate about this. We've all we've lived this journey through the disaster of Labour that's dead. Labour is a party of genocide. Even the complicit in genocide, even the MPs we like or have liked, John McDonald, Ian Byrne, they're complicit in Labour's support of genocide, arms sales to Israel, and so on. So we have to change that and move on. Thank you.
We got the message, and I'm going to take another question, and then perhaps you'll answer both. Shireen, can you ask your question too?
Thanks very much, and thanks to JVL for organising this. Yeah, I'm up in Scotland, so I know far more about the Scottish Greens than about the Green Party of England and Wales. So what I'm saying may apply more to the Scottish Green Party, but I'm a big sticking point for me, and it's very anti-socialist, is the way the Scottish Greens have embraced identity politics, and particularly the way they take a very intolerant and extreme and dogmatic position as a party on sex and gender in particular. And that's led them into a place where they lack any understanding of the interaction between women's rights and trans people's rights. And they lack that understanding largely because they don't allow debate. They've been very intolerant. They've accused anybody who doesn't share their very dogmatic position of being bigoted and transphobic, and they won't have that debate. And there's been quite an exodus from the party on that basis. So for me, the reason that I wouldn't even consider joining the Scottish Greens, although I agree with a lot of what you've said on this call, Zack, is partly because of their substantive position on sex and gender, and partly because of this intolerance of debate and this intolerance of a plurality of views, which I think, in this instance, has led them into a substantive cul-de-sac that's very, very dangerous. But it does get me thinking, what else would they take an intolerant position on and refuse to countenance any of the exchange of views that leads to a better position, a more strategies and understanding that are better for this complex world in which we find ourselves?
Oh, okay.
Thanks, Shireen.
I just want to say that I'm sure we all will agree. I don't want to elide these two issues now. I mean, I know I asked the two questions together, but I think, Joe, you made a very important issue about having a Labour Party that's complicit in genocide, and having the Green Party as the first party to recognise that there had to be a ceasefire after October the 7th. And so I want to allow you to say something about that issue first, Zack, and then we'll turn to this other issue, which is yes, Scotland, but of course it's everywhere. But please talk a little bit about the Green Party's view of Palestine and what's happening at this very moment, because it's all uppermost in our minds. I mean, in Cambridge now, there's another student encampment, but it's there partly because of what the university does, but it's also there because everybody's desperate to do something.
Yeah, I'll speak briefly on it because I think Joe spoke so powerfully just then. I still feel a little bit choked up from seeing Joe choked up too. And I think the way you speak, Joe, just I think demonstrates why I'm so proud that you're in the party and what you do for the party, and what an incredible asset you've been to the party, but both to the party, but to your residents and constituents, and also I have no doubt will play or continue to play a national role in politics too. I'm not dodging the question, but what I would say is I just did an interview with Middle East Eye. If you type Middle East Eye, Zack Polanski, then I speak for half an hour specifically about this issue, and that's probably better than a 1 minute answer now.
Yeah.
And the genocide, I think, is very clearly the call we should keep repeating. Now, I think there's other calls too, which is about ending the settlements, ending the occupation, and I think those things are important. What I tend to say to people, though, when they ask me, is that we know they are more divisive within the public, which doesn't mean we shouldn't be talking about them. We should be talking about them. But we know the immediate thing that needs to happen is to end the genocide and end arms sales to Israel. And I think that would make the biggest difference right now to both the conversation, but also the material actions for so many people living in Palestine and innocent people who are dying. And so I think sometimes if we try and say or do too many things at once, we lose people. And I think the rallying call right now should just be repeatedly, and it should not be contentious, for the majority of people, that innocent people are dying. Our government is not just complicit, they're active participants in it. And the number one thing we should stop doing is selling arms to Israel and using every diplomatic leverage that we have to stop this happening, including not offering Trump a state visit at the same time that he's talking about turning Gaza into a luxury condo. It's beyond depraved. And I think just for all of us to have the moral clarity and consistency in speaking up on this issue, and then, yes, of course, when we've got there, or when we're moving to there, then there's a much wider conversation to have about the occupation. But I think if we try and jump to there too quick, again, people just shout anti-Semitism at us, and I think it's much clearer right now to focus on the genocide. To Shireen's question, the first caveat I'll put, and I'm going to answer your question, so I'm not dodging it, but just the Scottish Greens have nothing to do with the Green Party of England and Wales, so I can't answer the Scottish Greens. But Tony, as he alluded to, we've definitely had this conversation within the Green Party of England and Wales too. I'm going to be dogmatic with the first bit, and then I'll tell you where I think this conversation. As a gay person who's in the LGBT community, I grew up during Section 28, and I experienced what it felt like when it felt like the media, schools were trying to erode my human rights and erode my identity. So when I hear identity politics, I do think identity politics can be a huge distraction from the material living conditions that people are facing in right now. And that's why I always try and make sure, as I did in my comments today, that the places I focus on is tackling the inequality at our society that is coming from multimillionaires and billionaires. At the same time, though, I think identity politics, if that's another phrase for human rights, and that's what I would say, is also really important. And I know we're going to get into the conversation now. I can see you shaking your head. But for me, trans rights are human rights, and that's non-negotiable. Where I agree with you, and I think is somewhere where the party has space to work on, is that I do think we need to have conversations and we need to have discussions. But for me, the very beginning of that conversation needs to be respectful. And for me, what is respect? People's respect, different people come at different ways. My line has always been that if someone is willing to sit down in mediation or discussion with me, or a trans person, I'm very happy to have that conversation. But there are red lines, such as misgendering someone. If it's done accidentally, it's fine. I've misgendered people before. We're all on a learning curve. But if it's done repeatedly because someone doesn't recognize someone else's identity, I don't think that's a progressive step. And whilst I think there's places for conversation like that in society, I think, all the things I've spoken to tonight are about not being such a broad church that everything is accepted. For me, misgendering is harassment. And I know some people would find that difficult. And I accept that. It's not my job to convince everyone or make everyone happy. It's my job to lead a political party and be clear about what my values and the values of what I believe the party are. So that's not a no to debate, and it's not a no to conversation. It's a yes to respectful debate and respectful conversation. Thank you.
Zach. Naomi. You're muted, Naomi.
Yes, hi. Thanks for coming along, Zach. And I really take on board Joe's contribution. I know how important it was that the Greens opened their arms and welcomed her after the terrible experiences in the Labour Party. So I'm not undervaluing that at all. Just wanted to say, I think we have to accept the reality. You painted a picture of politics in this country now, and broadly, I agreed with it. But what I think you didn't quite acknowledge is that people come from many different traditions, and people are confronting the austerity, the inequality, the injustice, the war, the genocide, and everything from different perspectives and in different forums. And a lot of people regard the Greens as an established party, which is part of the system that they hate and distrust. And although you are a new broom and you're putting a very fresh and vibrant perspective forward, lots of people won't be listening to that. They'll just be seeing, oh, it's one of those parties. That's a fact, I'm afraid. It definitely is. The question of the IHRA definition and the way the party handled that is a bit of a sticking point with quite a lot of people that I'm working with. So that the history of the party isn't glorious. I hear people constantly, because I'm part of these discussions. How are we going to work with people who are members of the Greens? How are we going to acknowledge the importance of the Green Party in trying to build a new movement which can undermine reform, resist reform, stop fascism in its tracks? So, you know, people talk about, oh, Bristol, terrible things happened in Bristol, Brighton. You're I don't know if it's a sister party or not, but the German Green experience is very frightening to a lot of us. So I think you're going to have to accept that a lot of people won't join you, not because they dislike you or dislike local people that they know in the Green Party. They will do it because they're coming to the new movement we need to build from different perspectives, whether it's Palestine, housing, anti-racism, refugees, anti-war, whatever. So I'm with Richard on this, and somebody else asked the question. We need to know what you are going to do about that fact. It's no good just to say to people,
okay,
you need to join the Greens. Will you encourage your members to work with non-Greens at local level in these various campaigns that are building, that are really, really important if we're going to stop reform in its tracks? And will you, at national level, accept the need to cooperate in certain constituencies and certain areas? I think it's really important. That's it.
Thanks, Naomi.
My role at the moment is running for leader of the Green Party. And when I'm the leader of the Green Party, or I hope to be leader of the Green Party, I'll continue to keep saying, join the Green Party. I totally accept that some people won't join the Green Party. And actually, I'd push the question even further. I accept that some people won't join the Green Party because of me or because of nonsense about German Greens, totally different parties. There's nothing I can do about that. The only thing I can do is present a positive, hopeful vision where I already know lots of people are joining, and I hope lots of people will continue to join. I accept I'm not going to get everyone. And I also accept, I think Joe put a really important point forward, that there's clearly some exceptions here in terms of, I think there's a case to be made for the independent MPs. I think there's a case to be made for the people who have been working hard, like Faiza Shaheen and Andrew Feinstein and Liane Mohammed. Those aren't my decisions to make. Those are decisions of all the members and a democratic way to make. But I also think if people keep putting up resistance because of things like the German Greens or because of things like the history of the party, these people were in the Labour Party. I could give you a whole lecture. I'm sure you don't need it, about the history of the Labour Party and some of the things they've done in the past. And I would take the history of the Green Party any day over that. So I accept the party's not perfect. I accept not everyone will join. I'm here tonight to say that I think this is a really hopeful, inspiring movement that can get lots of people to join. And I hope people will jump in and get involved in that way. And I imagine lots of people will, except some people won't too. But I'm not looking for a mass movement that involves absolutely every single person.
Okay. Now we've got two more questions. I hope people will hang on until we get the answers, the questions and the answers, although we're heading towards 7:30. Maybe we'll get both the questions. Steve and then Linda. Steve, can you unmute yourself?
I agree with what you said about renationalisation. A practical question, how would you renationalise water, that's the current issue, without having to compensate the shareholders and cost billions? Thank you.
Thank you.
And then Linda.
Yeah, thanks to JVL and to Zack. This is really, really helpful. I joined a couple of days ago, Zack, specifically to vote for you, and because despite a lot of hesitations that I still have about the party, I am hopeful that we certainly need something that is an alternative that socialists can get around, and I'm hoping the Greens may be it. There are two things that I think will talk me into leaving the party if they don't change. And one is that if the Greens don't enter pacts in specific seats, because of the pittance of the money that you get on the what is it called? It's the short money. That's not an answer to me. And relatedly, the last time when you announced that there were only 4 serious candidates, that is only 4 candidates that you were going to campaign for, it said to everybody in seats such as in Croydon that the Green don't bother campaigning for the Green candidate because they're not going to get any serious support. And so it left people wondering, well, what in the world is going on here? The main point that I want to raise, though, is that I live in Lambeth, near Brixton, and one of the things that I've been really concerned with over the years is how white the left remains, and the Green Party, until very recently, was almost seemed to be a caricature in that respect. Now, I think that the Greens' position on Gaza and Palestine has done wonders, and it's fantastic. And I'm really one of the reasons that convinced me to join is because many of my Muslim friends have decided to join, and I can see that diversity is starting to take hold in the Greens, which has to be a great thing. But I want to know what you are going to do to attract Black communities and the global majority communities in who see you as utterly irrelevant.
Okay, thanks, Linda, and thank you for both questions. Can you?
Yeah, so I'll go in reverse order. So Linda, I don't accept that it's a pittance. We lost £1 million when we didn't stand in every single seat. £1 million to the Green Party is an extraordinary amount of money. And then the second part of your question, that we don't stand in every seat, as in we don't campaign in every seat, is because of a financial resourcing issue. So the two questions kind of contradict each other. I'm aware that I'm being a bit feisty here, but I'm aware we're also all Jewish on this call, and we're very it's the kind of argumentative debate, so I mean it in that spirit.
But most of us probably.
Sorry, actually, yeah, most of us. But I appreciate that you joined the party to vote for me, so I don't mean to come at you with feistiness when you've just said that, but I also think it's really important to defend our corner, and we are not the Labour Party where we can just throw money at things or expect to get national media coverage by the nature of being the party. The way we get our media coverage is by standing in every seat, but we also know target to win is the strategy we use to focus on seats where we believe we can win. I agree that 4 is too short and too few. That starts to look odd. But I also think, we'd had 1 MP. So to get to 1 MP to 4 MPs was a big achievement. Even though if we're standing, 30, 40, 50 MPs to win, there will be hundreds of seats in this country where there isn't an active campaign going on. That breaks my heart. I'd love an active campaign going on. But even in the Labour Party, there's lots of seats where they don't actively campaign because they know they just can't win it. So that's just exacerbated by the fact that we have less money. To your point, though, about the inclusivity of the party, the diversity of the party, it's something I've been doing loads of work on. And what I would say is that in the time that I've been deputy leader, there are so many both working class candidates and Black and brown, global south, global majority candidates and councillors around the country. And sometimes they often say to me, Narani, who is my campaign manager, is Sri Lankan. She says when she hears people say there's no diversity in the Green Party, she says it's actually insulting to all the people in the party who are doing all the work where their work is being erased. Is there enough diversity in the party? No, absolutely not, because there's not enough diversity in the left as you identified, and certainly not in the environmental movement either. So it's a huge piece of work we need to do. But actually, the party has been doing some really good work around this. I, in particular, have been working a lot with Black and brown communities, both in this campaign, but more widely for the last few years, turning up in their spaces, doing podcasts, speaking to lots of influencers on Instagram, and actually we've really seen that shifting. I don't think there's any easy solution to this other than not to expect people to come to the party, but actually to go out into people's spaces and do conversations, just as I'm doing tonight. To be honest, this is a community obviously I'm much more at home in, because it's literally my community. But I do these most nights. I'm speaking not on Zoom, but often turning up in people's spaces. And I know Jo does lots of work in her community, and I know there's loads of councillors that are actually out there doing this outreach. And I don't think there's any easier solution or quicker solution than just doing the work and being on the ground and that changing over time. What I do push back on gently, though, is the idea that we have no diversity, because actually it really, really is changing.
That's not what I said.
Do you want to just turn to the penultimate question?
Yes. Yes, I've been doing a lot of work on this in London in particular, Steve. And in fact, just before nationalisation, I asked Sadiq Khan just last week if he would sit on the board of Thames Water, because actually there's lots of cities around the world where they have political representation on their board. They did this in Berlin, where they had a referendum to bring water back into public ownership. And in Paris, sorry, the other way around, Paris had a referendum to bring it in public ownership. And in Berlin, they've put city authorities now on boards. Sadiq Khan wouldn't bite, which I think is ludicrous, that he's the mayor of London. It's not the step I want, it's the first step to doing it, but just the fact he wasn't willing to sit on the board to be able to say, no, you can't do these things, showed me how much Labour are in hock to private capital. In terms of nationalisation, even the shareholders themselves are saying that it's not worth any money anymore. I'm talking about Thames Water now, because of the dodgy infrastructure, because it's not had the investment. And actually, I think we should be buying it back with not a penny of money, because there's something called fair value usage, which recognises that actually it isn't worth anything because they haven't spent anything on it, because they've been giving all the money to the shareholders. So I'd like to see us bring it into expropriation and essentially take those infrastructure back into public control. When we sold Thames Water, and again, this is the same with lots of water company, we sold it without a penny of debt. So the idea that they're now in £70 billion of debt and that we should have to pay back that debt is ludicrous. We ultimately should be taking our public services back into public ownership.
Here. Okay, we've come to an end. And I think that, well, it's been great. We've had all these questions. They came fast and furious. Usually one's sort of pushing people. Where are the questions coming from? Here we've just had questions which have filled the evening. And I know I could ask another 10, 15 questions myself. And I imagine that's true of many of the people here. And so it's been a really energetic, vital occasion. And I'm very grateful, Zack, that you've given us your energy this evening, and that other people here have been. It's pretty good. We're still at 65. You know, basically you've held people's attention, and people are interested to think, where do we go from here as socialists? And many of us decided we go green, because we went to the Labour Party as green socialists. And now people like me are in the Green Party as green socialists.